To Made in America, claiming a kind of victory tonight. The American powerhouse Apple, famous for its giant manufacturing operations in China, has promised to do something they have not done in nearly 20 years. Build some Apple computers right here in the United States. And ABC's David Muir, captain of our Made in America team, is here with the latest details. David.
And Diane, as you know, for nearly 3 decades, Apple made its computers in the U.S. before starting to outsource production in the mid-90s. Tonight, one of their lines will soon bear those 3 words we've been reporting so much here, Made in America. Tonight, that bold announcement from Apple. CEO Tim Cook now says some of Apple's Mac computers will next year carry those 3 words, Made in America. Cook telling Bloomberg Businessweek that the company plans to spend $100 million next year to move production of the Mac line from China back here to the U.S. It was earlier this year when asked about the factories they used to have here in America that Tim Cook talked about the possibility of bringing manufacturing back.
There is some manufacturing revival in the U.S. Will there be an Apple product ever made again in the United States?
I want there to be.
And now a promise that there will be. The vast majority of Apple products are made overseas.
Wow.
The Foxconn factories in China, they make 40% of the world's electronics. Where just this year, ABC's Bill Weir took you inside for an exclusive look after working conditions there came under fire. This new move by Apple, moving their line of Macs back to America, still represents a small percentage of Apple's overall product line. iPhones, iPads would still be assembled overseas. But Cook has made the point before that key components of the iPhone, for instance, are made in America. The processor made here, the glass in Kentucky.
Will it ever say on the back of an Apple product, designed in California, assembled in the United States?
Several parts are from the United States.
Tonight, economists telling us Apple is now joining a trend that we've reported on extensively here on World News, an early wave of American companies beginning to rethink their strategy of where they manufacture their products. Chinese wages have risen 15 to 20% a year. Another key reason to come back, proximity, location. Make it here and you don't have to ship from China, saving a lot of money. Suddenly, the math for many companies isn't adding up. So they're deciding that Made in America makes more sense.
Yes, it's an economic question about being made in America. It's not necessarily a patriotic question. It's an economic question.
One that also creates a ripple effect here at home. The other jobs created. Just last night, we introduced you to Ariana Russell in St. Louis, making her own iPhone cases and determined to make her design here in America. So you found a way to do it here.
I found a way to do it here.
There was so much interest in those American-made iPhone cases last night that her website crashed within 5 minutes of our report. But it's back up and running tonight, and she tells us she sold 2,000 of those iPhone cases, Diane, in 24 hours. But on this larger announcement from Apple tonight, we reached out to our team of economists, and they all echoed one another, saying that this is about more than just goodwill. It's now good business. And Diane Swonk told us just before we came on the air tonight, this move puts an exclamation point on the trend we've all been reporting here.
American jobs back on the case again tonight. Thank you, David.
Take a look at the back of any iPhone, and you'll see a familiar phrase that's been printed on almost 1 billion units of the iconic product. Designed by Apple in California, assembled in China. Like everything at Apple, that wording is deliberate. Apple designs the exterior, writes the software, researches new technologies, and develops its own chips in California, which allows it to sell devices for 65% more than their cost. But iPhones are assembled in China for a reason. It's easy to assume that reason is cheaper labor. While wages are lower, this doesn't tell the whole story. In fact, assembly is only 2% of an iPhone's hardware cost. Today, most iPhones are made in 2 Chinese cities, Shenzhen and Zhengzhou. Favorable government policies helped Shenzhen become the electronics factory to the world, with Taiwanese company Foxconn its biggest employer. As a result, thousands of companies and millions of workers have moved to this southern Chinese city to be close to the action. During peak iPhone season, Foxconn hires almost 1 million people, cutting its workforce to a few 100,000 during low season. Such a cluster effect in Shenzhen means that most of the components need to make a phone, a laptop, or a drone are within a 50-mile radius. Attempts to recreate this cluster have so far failed. Brazil is the perfect example. Apple is facing high import tariffs in Brazil and urged Foxconn to make iPhones there. After securing local incentives, Foxconn built a factory, but very little changed. Rather than doing lots of high-level manufacturing in Brazil, Foxconn continued to do most of the work back in China, where the supply chain was nearby and parts could be pre-assembled. This meant that most of an iPhone was made in China and merely shipped to Brazil for local workers to slot together, like Lego. In the end, the Brazil project failed on two levels. It hired a fraction of the workers the government had expected, and it didn't attract any of Apple's hundreds of suppliers. If an iPhone is to be made in the US, it's more likely to follow the Brazil model, not the Shenzhen model, which means far fewer jobs, and for those workers, making for Apple would be as seasonal as picking apples. So while the US could one day boast an iPhone assembled in America, the question is, does it really want to?
Which one of these Apple gadgets is the odd one out? Did you get it? The answer is this 2013 Mac Pro. Not because it looks like a trash can, but because it's the only one that was assembled in the USA. The others were assembled in China. Why is that important?
Apple makes their product in China. I told Tim Cook, who's a friend of mine, who I like a lot, make your product in the United States. Build those big, beautiful plants that go on for miles, it seems.
President Trump, who is currently in the midst of a trade war with China, wants these Apple products to be more like this one. Actually, he wants them to be fully made in the USA. But Apple, one of the companies most exposed to the trade war, has one of the largest, most deeply integrated global supply chains. So could Apple ever move production back to the US? Trump's threat of imposing fresh tariffs could drive the cost of Apple's iPhone XS up by about $40. Fortunately for Apple, that tariff has been postponed until December 15th. And an earlier round of tariffs on circuit boards and computer chips has had minimal impact on the company. As China and the US keep fighting over trade, Apple is already moving some of its production to avoid tariffs and trade duties, like to India, for example, where many of Apple's major suppliers are relocating. That's no mean feat. The company moved production out of the US years ago, building a global supply network. It lists suppliers in over 25 countries, with some parts made in China since the early 2000s.
The way that I view this is the vast majority of our products are kind of made everywhere. Largely, I think that will carry the day in the future as well.
Others before Trump have tried to get Apple to bring jobs back to America. President Obama reportedly asked Steve Jobs what it would take to make iPhones in the US, to which Jobs said, "Those jobs aren't coming back."
Will there be an Apple product ever made again in the United States?
I want there to be.
So will it ever say on the back of an Apple product, designed in California, assembled in the United States?
It may.
The company has tried before. Remember that Mac Pro?
It is designed by brilliant engineers in California and assembled here in the USA.
A series of deaths at its main supplier's factory raised questions over working conditions in Asia. So the company invested $100 million to assemble the Mac Pro in Austin, Texas.
The reason the Mac Pro was moved back to the US, that's because it's a pretty low risk product, right? It's not making a ton of these. So it could move it here, test and see if it could do US manufacturing. And if so, then it could explore the opportunity for other products.
But the plant in Austin had issues when it came to locally sourcing enough components for the production of the Mac Pro, leading to delays. So what did the company do? They imported some of the parts from China, where manufacturers had capacity to keep up with demands.
How many tool and die makers do you know in the U.S. now? I could call a meeting around the United States and say, would every tool and die maker come to this room tonight? We wouldn't fill the room. In China, you would need several cities.
Recently, production in the Austin plant has fizzled out. And production of the new Mac Pro
This is the new Mac Pro.
has been relocated back to China, according to people familiar with the plans.
With the new Mac Pro, it's not hard at all to ship production back to China. This is Apple's playbook, right? They've perfected the art of making things in China. So transitioning the Mac Pro or any other product to China makes a lot of sense for them.
So what are Apple's choices if they want to navigate the tariffs? They have 3 options. Given how expensive and complex moving out is, Apple may just decide to stay in China and at some point potentially pay tariffs, which would likely make Apple products more expensive. Or Apple could move manufacturing, just not to the US. India and Vietnam are only 2 of the countries that are hoping to lure Apple and its suppliers. Finally, the company could strike an agreement with Trump. In July, Cook said tariff exclusions are key for Apple to make the new Mac Pro in America.
That's what's behind the exclusions, and so we're explaining that and hope for a positive outcome.
We contacted Apple following the latest round of tariffs, but the company declined to comment further. Apple hasn't recently moved any of its manufacturing back to the US, but it says it spent $60 billion with 9,000 US suppliers and companies last year, supporting 450,000 jobs. They're even building a new campus in Austin, Texas, the same city where that Mac Pro is no longer being assembled.